Hey guys, it's Comcalio Studios here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about how El Toro is running in 2023. For those of you unaware, El Toro closed in August of 2022 and remained closed for around 10 months until it reopened on Saturday, June 17th, 2023, and I had the honor of getting to ride it not only a whole bunch of times, but be among the first who rode it. We were the first train of the season. We were able to organize it, get some POVs. That's how you're seeing all this now in collaboration with the park. So it was a really great time. There's ERT for members and pass holders. Overall, a really great event. I was able to ride El Toro a total of 11 times in the morning and early afternoon, just kind of throughout that ERT period. And through my rides, I rode a whole bunch of different rows, only on the A train, though I did hear opinions from others on the B train that I'll discuss later. And I was able to really get a feel for what they did on the ride in terms of track work, where it felt really smooth, where it still felt a little bumpy, and overall just how the ride is. This is going to be a very specific look at the ride, so in no way am I implying that the ride is unsafe or anything along those lines if I say there's a rough patch. All wooden coasters have a bit of a bite to them. That's what makes them wood coasters, and El Toro is no different. If it was glass smooth, then it really just would not be a wooden coaster. So it's good that it has a little bit of a bite to it. But we are going to go over the entire experience of the ride ever since it had its track work and other work done to it over the off season between 2022 and 2023 and all that time after and before. So let's start off with looking at the trains themselves, which look phenomenal. For those of you unaware, B train, which is the darker train now, used to be known as the Kia train or the Kia Soul train. It was wrapped in Kia advertising for years. I always thought it looked pretty stupid, and I thought that it would be much better if they restored it to the original darker color scheme. Prior to that, it was a ridiculously bright stride gum advertisement, which just looks stupid. So this year, they restored it back to its former original glory from when it first opened back in '06, and it looks great. And don't worry, A-Train was not neglected in that regard either. It also received some aesthetic work, and both trains look great. There's new gray accents on the arm guards and headrests, and overall the trains just look phenomenal. New paint everywhere. Everything just looks nice and fresh and new. You could tell the Great Adventure team put a lot of care into making El Toro's trains look the best they ever have, and they look great. Now, that doesn't matter if they don't ride great, and they do ride great, don't worry. It's very smooth, and I'm going to go element by element just to give you guys a sense of where you can expect things to feel different, where you can expect things to feel the same. So starting off with the turn and the lift hill, it is identical. I did hear from some people that the lift hill might have been slowed down, but I personally didn't feel that at all. Felt just as fast as it normally is. Still slows down at the top as it has for the past few years now. It does just for the sake of the upstop wheels and the trough for the lift, but it's been like that for years, so no change there. Now we get to the first section of new track. I remember way back in the end of 2022, we were seeing new track being put at the end of the turn on the top of the lift hill, and you can definitely see that. You don't really feel anything there though because you're going at such a slow speed. Any section of track where there was work done and you're not really traveling at a fast speed, you're not even going to notice it because you're not really experiencing much force anyways. However, the drop still feels just as great and unhinged as it always does. You get thrown out of your seat the same way you used to. And then we get into the first section of newness, I guess you could call it. We know that there was a section of track replaced at the bottom of the first drop, and it looked like prefabricated track. I still don't know if this track came from Intamin or if it was made in-house by Great Adventure, but either way, it is super smooth. I really wish they would retrack more of the ride with this track because it is so smooth. It felt almost like a steel coaster riding over that section of track. The whole first valley from the first drop to the start of the airtime hill, the first airtime hill, was really smooth. It did not feel like El Toro at all. It felt like what I imagined it felt like back when it first opened in 2006, where it had rave reviews of being super smooth. It was incredibly smooth, not even a bit of a jitter, and it really didn't matter if you were on a back wheel seat, non-wheel seat, front wheel seat. It was just great. Then you fly up into the first camelback hill, and it was great as always. I did feel that it wasn't as extreme as the second camelback hill, though I always did feel that the second camelback hill had a bit more of a bite than the first one, but don't worry, the first one still throws you out of your seat and keeps you out of your seat throughout the entire element. Still just as great as it always was, nothing really different there. From there, we enter the second valley of the ride in between the two airtime hills. This is where the on-ride picture is taken. And this is another section where there was track replaced, and you really can feel the difference between the old track and the new track here. This is where I felt the biggest difference, at least. So the first half of that valley, there is brand new track, just like at the bottom of the drop, and it is super smooth, like riding on glass. It feels great. And then it transitions back to the older track, and I don't really remember this section of the ride being particularly rough. It was the roughest of the valleys prior to the turnaround, but I did feel just a slight bit of roughness here, which I especially noticed when I was in the front of a car. Overall, throughout the whole ride, this is not something I would have said in the past, but I feel like you're better off riding in the back of a car on a back wheel seat as opposed to a front of a car or front wheel seat. Just for perspective, El Toro has 6 cars per train that make up the 36 rows you have. So each row is a different kind of seat. There's the front row of a car, which is what we call a front wheel seat. There are 2 rows in each car that have wheels underneath them, and those are wheel seats. There's the front one and the back one, and of course the one in the middle. The middle one is called the non-wheeled seat. So I personally found in my rides, of course, non-wheeled seat is always going to be the smoothest experience, but I preferred the feeling of a back wheel seat as opposed to a front wheel seat, as I feel like the front wheel seat just took some of the elements a little more rough than the back wheel seat. Back wheel seat still, of course, does have that classic El Toro bite to it. However, it just wasn't as painful per se as the front, and that's not saying El Toro's painful at all. It's just you feel the roughness a bit more pronounced when you're in the front of a car as opposed to the back of a car, and this moment here is definitely one where I felt that. Of course, though, you head up into the second Camelback Hill, which is just absolutely insane. You get thrown out of your seat and held out of your seat. I especially felt strong airtime on both of these hills when you're on a wheeled seat. I feel like when you're on a non-wheeled seat, you don't feel the airtime as extreme just because you're not sitting on a wheel. But when you're directly on a wheel, you feel those uplift forces much stronger than you would otherwise, and it really is absolutely amazing. From there, we head into the turnaround. The turnaround has been an area of the ride I know a lot of people have been concerned about, as that really seemed to get the most work done on it. There was a ton of new wood at the bottom of the turnaround, which you can see here from the off-ride. You could see it really from everywhere you look at the ride. You look at that section, you can see it in Frontier Adventures, that bright new wood, and it definitely looks and sounds much more sturdy and just better overall. It sounds a lot smoother, and it definitely is a bit smoother than it used to be. This was notorious for being the roughest section of the ride. You'd feel some pretty strong jackhammering here, but nothing terrible, and now the jackhammering definitely is lessened, but it is still present. You will still jump around a little bit through this section of the ride. I don't know that there was new track placed down here. I do remember that there was track segments removed. I don't know if they added prefab track there or not. It was kind of hard to tell from where I was sitting, but it definitely is still a bit rough down there, so just brace yourself the same way you would for past rides on El Toro. That section of the ride is a little smoother, but it still has that classic El Toro bite to it. From there, you fly up and into that floater hill area. That whole section of the ride felt completely unchanged to me, nothing different about it at all. If you remember El Toro's middle section from last year, years before, it feels identical, no change there. From there, you're going to fly up into one of the most iconic roller coaster elements of all time, the Rolling Thunder Hill. The Rolling Thunder Hill felt absolutely great. Felt very sturdy, very strong, very intense, and really just awesome. From this point on the ride, I feel like El Toro was running great. Wasn't terribly rough through the twister section. I actually felt like it was much smoother than it had been in past years. It just felt really, really good through that whole final stretch of the coaster. It felt really, really good. And then, of course, you end out the ride. Now, of course, first ride of the day, it was running slower than you would expect it to. However, I felt that for being in the morning and being one of the first cycles of the day, it was running really fast, and it did not take long for El Toro to warm up. And it wasn't a particularly hot day either. When we were riding it, it was only around 70 to 75 degrees, so it wasn't super hot, and the sun wasn't really out that much, but it was flying, especially after about an hour or so of cycling. It was really, really flying, and I think this is one of the best years for El Toro in recent memory. Of course, I was never able to ride it back in 2006. I only rode El Toro for the first time in 2013 when I was tall enough, but from what I've heard from other people, El Toro was amazing back then, and this is pretty close, at least the closest we're probably going to get to getting 06 Toro back. Of course, it's never going to be quite as smooth as it used to be. However, I think this is a huge improvement over years past. It's much more smooth, much easier to enjoy. And now I do want to talk about the differences between A-Train and B-Train. In the past, I always preferred A-Train. I just felt B-Train was a little rougher than A-Train, and I've heard mixed opinions from people. Some people said that B-Train was a bit rougher than A-Train, which would line up with what I know from past experiences. The color change of B-Train would not change the way it rides, so I imagine it probably is still a little rougher, but I'm going to reserve judgment until I get to experience B-Train. For now, I still recommend A-Train, and personally, I will take a back row ride on El Toro over a non-wheeled seat ride. It wasn't really that rough back there, quite honestly, especially for a back wheel seat. It was actually smoother than the front row, which is something I never thought I'd say, but it was really, really good. Definitely get to Great Adventure as soon as you can to ride El Toro. It's running great this year. And with that being said, that is going to conclude this video going over how El Toro rides in 2023. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos coming soon to Hollywood Studios. Goodbye, guys.